So are we now at a point where, as practitioners within making and supporting that, where we've got the humility and maturity to know what we can't do and to know what making is not good for, or what these spaces are not optimized for? And is that, how do we...
I think that's a bit early. I think we need to mess about still.
You think we're still
I think so,
teenage?
because it's still an idea for some people, not an experience.
Yeah.
And I think we're at the stage where we need to move from hearing about it to experiencing it, then engagement, then gain confidence. Once there is enough confidence, we can move on to the next, again, to kind of,
Yeah.
in
And
that
I guess
sense.
that's why you're not a makerspace.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you're a museum that's got a community that you're participating and co-curating with.
Mm-hmm. The making is an element of that. So it's there's tools there that we can empower people to help make the museum. I would say it's also about, there's a sense of pride that comes with making something yourself as well. And most people, it's about those feelings that you feel like when you make something that you feel like vital, I suppose, and effective. So there's something about feeling as part of the impact. And we know, because we've measured the impact of making on well-being, and it did prove that it did have an immune boost. So people did have an immune boost prior to making. And I think there's something in that in terms of, health. How can we have be making on prescription, or how can we help solve some of the well-being issues that are out there? Mental health is a big thing, and so we get a lot of people coming into the museum with mental health issues, people volunteering, and it's actually, we see it, making is actually helping their well-being and their mental health, because they're coming in regularly as volunteers into that workshop, supported by a community.
So we have making, we have well-being, we have manufacturing, we have ecological or sustainability issue. There are all kinds of things that are, and I think sometimes they are clustering together, and making is useful, and sometimes I think making is actually not part of the story, even with manufacturing. Sometimes it's not just, and we need, I think this umbrella term is a bit beginning to be too fluffy for everything, and even that claiming all these stories, and it's back to this, the narrative that's useful to get young people to feel like they can invent stuff and feel confident. Is making useful for that? It could be, but it's not the only way. And I think what you've been talking about, or Wayne was talking about, the amount of people who have a heritage relationship of making. Do they see in it, you talked about pride. So that's something that suddenly the maker movement is useful for, but getting them employed, that's more what the skills are useful for?
Yeah, I think there's a certain, to me, there's a bit of a separation between manufacturing and making, and I do like the way we use different terms, because if you're on the production line in the engine plant for Vauxhalls, I'm sure when you're driving down the motorway and you see a Vauxhall go past, you don't go, I made that. Every time you see a Vauxhall go past. And I think, to me, making is about people doing it for either hobbyists or for personal use, or to solve a personal problem. People who choose to make, not because they're doing it as a job. I think if you're doing it as a job, you may be a maker as a job, I'm not saying you're not, but that's to me the difference between someone who's working in manufacturing and someone who's a maker. And I don't see them as the same thing. I'm not saying manufacturing isn't making, but it's done for a different reason and with different people.
I don't know if the story that Hannah often flags about the Rolls Royce engine. Do you know that story? Can you tell us? If not, I can.
So, which one? So, do you mean the...
So when, within the silk mill, once you had the Rolls Royce engine up and open and on display, when that was gifted, you then had people from your community coming in, able to say what they did, which bit they were part of, which bit.
Yeah,
and that's phenomenal, because then you've taken manufacturing, which is nearly invisible, inner cities at this point, and which is changing its characteristics now so much that it's not necessarily recognizable where it appears anyway.
Yeah.
And you're giving people a way of kind of going, I made that.
So yeah, we co-produced an exhibition with Rolls Royce for their. They created the new Trent XWB engine, and they wanted to show it off to the public. So they wanted to show it off in the museum. So we created this exhibition, and then we had people coming in and sharing their stories about which part they'd made. And one guy had actually come in and said, I can actually now tell my mum what I do because I'm this tiny part of this huge process. And so that was really interesting that, you know, people were sharing with their families and, you know, intergenerational as well, what they'd been doing for 4 years and why they were so stressed at work. And so they could share that with their families and kids, and it was great. And we got people sharing stories through that. So I think understanding making as well is another
So I think that's the big challenge, is to connect that experience or the education proposals with the strategy, the industry strategy, and connect design and connect craft and connect manufacturing to industrial strategy. And that hasn't happened yet. We're beginning to see the first bits, but that really hasn't connected to what kind of education should we now have in order to reach industrial strategy again, in a way. What kind of places, what kind of public engagement with making should we have in order for industrial strategy that is being talked about to play out and not just become another thing that we've heard about and disappears.
So we had a prototyping conversation about prototyping, similar setup to this, with panel members, and we had someone from Stratasys, a 3D printing company, and he made a really interesting point at the end of his presentation. He talked about, you know, we should be in a position where we're able to share with young people currently what we're developing for the future, because they need to know what we're developing for the future in order to gain the skills and be passionate about and have a say as well about what's being made. So Rolls Royce are currently working on, you know, engines for the future.
Was he relating to a creative sector at all, or was he relating to engineering outside the not connected?
So he was relating that to young people and the skills
Just
that
generally.
they need. Yeah, just generally, that we should be sharing with young people what the development process and the products that we're developing that they're going to be going into manufacturing industries to work on, because then we can start to develop the skills. So employers and manufacturers need to be sharing that with the younger generation rather than kind of keeping all R&D private and separate.
I think there's an issue there as well with the skill set, because colleges and universities are playing a numbers game because they have to. So they will sell the popular courses and the popular things that people will apply to, not necessarily the things that are needed for the future. So, you know, look.
That's not the case.
No, there is a lot. I mean, there's a lot of kind of.
No, it's not, because the TEF that's coming out, TEF 2, TEF 3, employability, that's the whole issue. Sorry, we can't say that, because what's driving all thinking now is the fact employability of students is a key issue. So I wouldn't make a generalised statement of that. Is that,
Well, maybe historically then.
well, I think we have to be careful about making those generalised statements.
I think that comes in to my next point, which is the kind of the mythologization. Is that even a word?
It
The
is now.
myths.
Yeah.
That people within design view manufacturing as a kind of mythical beast, and it's big and it's lumbering and it's slow, and we kind of have this myth of how it behaves. And then within manufacturing, there's a myth as to how creative and digital sector works, and that we're all kind of on our bouncy chairs with our grass-filled office with slides and not taking things seriously. And because we're these interventions in the form of maker spaces or in the form of investment in maker culture or networking, designed based on sometimes myths held by either side, they can't land. Or when they do land, they sit there like the Fab Lab did in its early days and kind of went, right, we're here.
What's happened next? Yeah.
Like, we hear you like these things. Come on, come and do this. And I wonder kind of, can we conclude with kind
what
of...
was it, in 2005, the Cox report described the 5 barriers for working with creative industry in a way.
Yeah.
And that's one of the main one is perceptions, but the other one is lack of experience
Yeah.
and fear of risk taking. And actually now we can try things faster, we can prototype, we can iterate, and we can do it together and we can do it openly. So we can almost diffuse some of those barriers in a way, and I think that should be part of policies, is to diffuse those barriers and put things together. Like you were talking about arts and manufacturing, but we also have to, I think about it broader.
Yeah.
And there's a makerspace trying to be inside a hospital. There's a makerspace in a farming arena. So it's not. I think it's not all about this kind of one model, and they have to fit. But it's really about these programs that bring together different bits of knowledge and people with that knowledge into these situations. I think earlier today we were talking about places that unexpected things can happen in. And that's one of the definitions I think should be in the kind of, if unexpected things are not happening, something's wrong in education, in makerspaces.
Can we end we'll end this bit and then we'll open it up. Responding to probably two things. What should the makerspace of the future look like and what should it do? And also, what should policy or regions do to encourage the good things of maker culture and to kind of make a positive future state of making and manufacturing? Nice little questions there.
Support museums
Okay.
that are doing
You
this.
stole my one.
That's
Yeah.
It's a whole answer because, I mean, we launched Fellow Manchester with a business plan of what we thought it would be, and then spent the next 7 years following it, basically. And I think it evolved, because it was a new thing at that time. It evolved itself, and we kind of had to be flexible enough to try and follow it as it was. And it's still evolving, and I think, the making rooms is a lot different than Fellow Manchester was, and there's lots of iterations in between that. And I think to say, what's it going to look like in the future is so difficult because it's evolving so quickly and changing so quickly. And it is, to a certain extent, being, if not led, at least guided by technology. And so it's all an impossible question to answer. What should it look like in the future? Hopefully, a big community that all share ideas and share knowledge and experience with whatever technology is there at the time.
That works. Thank you.
Well, I'm hoping that we're trying to build what it should look like in the future too. So it should be able to involve communities in being truly open and accessible, but not just in coming to the building. So the fact that we're creating a bus which is going out, so it shouldn't just be people needing to come in. We should be going out. So it should be proliferating in communities too, and it should be led by them. Definitely.
Yeah, I think the future is not spaces, it's programs.
Mm-hmm.
And the places are so limited. So it needs to be programs, and part of these programs should happen in people's kitchens, using their ovens to manufacture stuff or try prototype, and some of these should happen in existing factories or universities where there's amazing kit, and after hours they open up to be used differently. So I think slack time will be a big thing if we can use it. So I think it's about programs, really, in one sense. And in terms of your question about policy, is to support people to be able to take part in these programs and understand that these activities, the Saturday arts clubs, and I'm including Fixperts in this, are things that are part of industrial strategy. They're not just like a bubble of, they're not about having a go. They're really part of building something. They're part of the ecosystem of creating kind of, okay, so where does a kid meet making for the first time? If it's not at home, then it might be in the nursery, or if it's not in the nursery, it might be in a school. If it's not in the school, it might be in a museum visit. If it's not there, it might be in high school in the engineer, or it might be later. And many people don't get to go to galleries at all. Most people don't, or museums. So it has to come out to there. And say, where does a kid that finds out, and let's say she is really good at messing about, invented a material, how does she know where to go next? And so there are where's the stepping stone? And I think the policies should help identify these stepping stones. So this kid should maybe go to college, and maybe from college into an incubator, and maybe from an incubator into an accelerator, or to a university, or maybe straight into business. But these options, I think we need to understand what they are.
So
and policies should allow this clarity of what are the options. If you are, really good on your Minecraft, or you're really good at video making, how do we know what's the potentials? And they are super employable because they are so good at connecting to each other and solving problems, and so maybe they're really good at data and making. And so I think these stepping stones, these pathways, that's kind of a bit what we try to do with the CRL, is kind of add a big stepping stone that keeps people in the UK rather than drop off in a place that we identified a gap. But the CRL being there doesn't mean that people know it's there, or the making rooms, or the museum. How do people know that this is an option?
Well, there's a responsibility as a region to kind of make legible what is there, what is possible, and to enable a broad set of literacies and ways of doing things, so that people can come together and make the future.
Yeah, and that's what a festival does. So festivals are great for shifting perception and telling people about things they don't know. A museum is good as a place that builds on that knowledge, but you've got to know about it to get there. And I think so we need different formats working together, and that's why I think a conversation like this in a festival together with the local government is the kind of things that we need more of, and to see them supported.